Hola, amigos. Hello, friends. I'm Tara Bachland, and with me is
Alberto Carbo. Nice to see everyone. ¿Qué tal? ¿Todo bien? Mucho gusto.
and today is herbs in Spanish or Spanglish. That's what we decided, as much as possible to help you get familiar with the plants. And for those of you who are language lovers or learning a language, Spanish or English in particular, can help you along the way too. So today's herb is Yarrow, and its botanical Latin name is Achillea millefolium, which can be super helpful for those of you who already speak a Latin-based language. Gives you a good idea of what it's already about.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely think knowing Spanish facilitated my learning of the Latin names of the plants. Entonces, si hablas español, tienes una ventaja para aprender los nombres latinos de las hierbas, which are very important because even though the traditional names tell us so much about the plant, in the modern day global world, you want to know that you're talking about the same plant.
Exactamente. You can still be speaking the same language, which is so fascinating, but be talking about different things. And we're not just talking about, I mean, that happens with herbs all the time.
Yeah.
Entonces puede discutir en la misma lengua, pero a veces están discutiendo, conversando, ¿sí? Sobre cosas totalmente diferentes. Entonces es muy importante, it's really important to know the botanical Latin as well. And this is an interesting one because there's myth and history involved in this one. And I think you were going to share more about this, about la historia, el mito, también de Achillea millefolium.
Sí, entonces Achillea millefolium es el nombre latín y ese nombre fue otorgado o fue asignado por Linnaeus, uno de los emperadores romanos. Y antes de eso, before that, Linnaeus gave the name Achillea millefolium, but before that, it was called hierba militaris. Entonces, a herb for military purposes, for the army, for soldiers, para los soldados, para las heridas. Y interesantemente, el Aquiles viene de la leyenda o el mito griego de Aquiles, el gran guerrero, or the great warrior Achilles. The ancient Greek mythological story, that is where Achilles comes from. The name Achilles for this herb comes from. And it is said that he healed himself and his soldiers with this herb during battle, which gave him great advantage. Él sanaba a sus soldados y a sí mismo durante las batallas y le daba una gran ventaja sobre sus enemigos. Y bueno, la segunda parte, or the second part of the Latin name, millefolium, significa mille es miles o thousands, y folium es folia o leaves o hojas en español. Entonces, tiene muchas hojas, or has many leaves. Y si miramos la rama y las hojas, son unas hojas largas, pero cada hoja tiene miles de hojitas chiquitas, or each individual leaf has many small leaves coming out of it. Entonces, 1,000 leaves or millefolium.
And that's what's so interesting is literally, I love this about language. So a lot of people know about mil, or like millimeter is 1,000, a thousandth. Entonces, si hablas español es muy simple, ¿sí? Porque mil ya es mil. But in English, it's a little more challenging. You just, we can take from other Latin derivatives. And so here we have an example. Aquí es un ejemplo de la hoja con 1,000 cortas, es como 1000 cortas, ¿sí? Entonces, so for, who is it? Who is the one that, who is the captain that used it for his soldiers?
Achilles.
Achilles himself.
Mhm.
And so you can see there's a perfect example. It's amazing how in the language itself you can see what it's for. So what a better herb, because it's used, it's one of its primary uses, uno de los usos primarios es para las cortas, para los daños, heridas de cuando, principalmente cuando salga la sangre. Más y mejor si salga sangre como un volcán, right? It is really good for cuts, and especially those that are bleeding cuts. And here we have the cuts in the leaf. It's the examples, the doctrine of signature for this herb. It has other uses, but we're starting, this is a terrific place to start. And it's even better, those cuts that where the blood is just squirting out, it's even better for this. But in el contrario, on the contrary, también es bueno para los daños, heridas que necesiten sangrar un poquito o mucho. Like if the blood is stopped up and you need to cleanse the blood, it needs to move, el sangre necesita mover. Es muy importante a veces mover el sangre también. Sometimes you really need to move that blood to help clean the injury.
Uh-huh. Y es una, bueno, dicen que, or it is said that Achilles, the mythological Greek warrior, or el luchador o combatante mitológico griego, aprendió cómo usar la Milenrama de Quirón, el centauro, o sea, el otro carácter mitológico que era mitad caballo, mitad humano. So Achilles is said to have learned the use of Yarrow from Chiron, the centaur, who was half horse, half human, and who is known as the wounded healer. Chiron también es conocido como el sanador con heridas. Entonces, y eso nos dice mucho de su uso, porque es para las heridas, y a través de usarlo uno mismo, si uno tiene una herida, es la mejor forma de aprender que funciona. The best way to learn that it works is, you have an injury and you use it and you're like, oh, okay, it does work.
This is part of the Greek mythological first aid kit. ¿Cómo se dice first aid kit en español?
Pues en Colombia diríamos botiquín, pero la verdad no sé en otras partes si así dirían, pero déjenos saber si hay otra palabra para botiquín o para como una, no bolsa, pero sí, algo para primeros auxilios,
Primeros auxilios.
Sí, primeros auxilios que sí, no sé, botiquín es la palabra que yo conozco, pero sí, algo que como
un kit de primeros auxilios.
Exacto, un kit de primeros auxilios.
Sí, entonces imagino un kit de primeros auxilios del mito griego, del Achilles y también Chiron. So this is right from the first aid kit from Chiron and Achilles themselves.
Ajá, y bueno, pues también hay el nombre en inglés, para los que quieren aprender inglés y para los que ya saben inglés, for those who already speak English, for those who are trying to learn, the English common name, of course, is Yarrow, which sounds nothing like Achilles. And, so where does that name come from? And in the book, Modern Herbal by Maud Grieve, she talks about how it's likely an Anglo-Saxon derivative, an old Anglo-Saxon derivative, which was Yarrow, and that turned into Yarrow over years. Entonces los anglosajones le decían Yarrow, lo cual es interesante. It's interesting porque Yarrow kind of sounds a little bit like hierba, like it's like a similar sound. The spelling is different, but it's the sound is kind of similar.
¿Cómo es? Otro es. How is it?
Yarrow.
It's casi como Yahweh. It almost sounds like Yahweh also, like is a synonym, another word for a god. And not just a god, but depends on your religion, depende de la religión. Sí, a veces dicen mismo Yahweh por Dios.
Total.
Kind of is the god of herbs in a way with I mean, its powers. Es casi como una diosa de hierbas en una manera.
Sí, total. Y es interesante ver los nombres porque, o sea, si suena como Yahweh o hierba o algo así, es como, ¿por qué? Para mí es como muy curioso que en lugares totalmente diferentes hay un sonido parecido. There's a common sound, even though these names come from totally different places. So in a way, maybe we're all connected.
It's incredible. That's what I was interested in doing this type of podcast. Es por esto que me interesaba hacer un podcast así, porque puedes ver tantas más cosas. So you can see so many more things when you add in another dynamic. And so let's keep going. Vamos a continuar.
Bueno, entonces en inglés también Yarrow, milfoil es otro nombre, it's another name, milfoil, que es millefeuille, o que en francés es hoja, o so in French, feuille is a leaf. So mille, again, from Latin, meaning thousand, so thousand-leaved. And in Spanish, you have the name Milenrama. So rama is like a branch. So you would say la rama del árbol, or the branch of a tree. So rama is referring, of course, to the stem of the yarrow, and mil meaning there's mil on the stem, or miloja, which again, thousand-leaved. And para la gente que le encanta comer, como a mí, or for those who are foodies out there, miloja is also a great dessert.
Really?
Have you ever had miloja?
I don't think so.
Yeah, in South America, in Sudamérica, los latinos sabrán, la miloja es un postre, it's a dessert that is, it's got like, not 1,000, but, it's got many layers, and it's, I believe it's, what's that?
Is it phyllo?
Yes, phyllo, and so it's thin layers of like crunchy but buttery, and then it has like a cream on the in between each layer. It's really good.
Like a South American baklava, or
sí,
their own version.
Y
yo voy a tener que buscar una receta. ¿Tienes una receta? Do you have a recipe for that?
¿Sabes? No lo he hecho en mucho tiempo, pero debería. Es muy rico. I haven't made it in a long time, but I probably could pull up a recipe. Yeah, I could probably find one.
Oh, interesting. Cool. Well, también lo que es interesante es que en portugués folia es folia. Entonces, para los que hablan el portugués es muy fácil. So in Portuguese it's very easy. Milefolia is leaf, is hoja. So it's a fun language thing.
Yeah. Y otro nombre viene del francés, y si se sintonizaron a nuestra clase del género plantago, or if you watched our plantain or plantago species class, or podcast rather, there we talked about how the name a lot of times indicates the use, or el nombre indica el uso de la planta. Entonces, en francés, este nombre que le dan au charpentier, o la hierba del carpintero, the herb of the carpenter, shows you that, carpenters, cuts, bruises, what do you call that when you smash your fingers? Machucarse is what we would say in Spanish. Entonces, para los carpinteros que se cortan o se aporrean a menudo, es perfecta. Y sí, eso es básicamente, no tiene tantos nombres, or doesn't have as many names as llantén or plantago, but a lot of history, a lot of history, mucha historia, mucho mito or myth. Y casi se me olvidaba, aunque el nombre latín o botánico, the Latin or botanical name viene or comes from Achilles, which we don't know how old those stories are, or if they're how old they are, whether they were true or not. But still, even if they're just stories, how old are those stories? No sabemos la historia de Aquiles, cuánto tiempo tiene, cómo es de vieja. Pero en Irak encontraron en unas cuevas, in Iraq they found in some caves una tumba o a grave of Neanderthals, de neandertales, y después de verificar cuánto tiempo o cómo de vieja era esa tumba, how old, they did carbon dating to see how old the grave was, and it's 60,000 years old, and the remains were laid on a bed of Yarrow. Entonces tiene 60,000 años esta tumba que encontraron en una cueva en Irak, y los cadáveres estaban encima de una cama hecha de Milenrama, y la Milenrama estaba fosilizada. The Yarrow was fossilized, which is why they could tell what it was. So 60,000 years is a long time, and you wonder, like, well, could the Achilles story be that old, or is it more recent and that is even older? Or but in any case, people have been using plants, and specifically yarrow, for a long time.
Well, and it comes up in so many cases. I think what's interesting about the name, lo que me interesa del nombre, es que sí, tiene pocos nombres comparando con plantago, right? Comparing to plantain, has very few names. But similarly, the uses are very more specific. Los usos son más específicos. Como plantago era los usos eran 1,000. Right, the uses for plantain, there's like 1,000, but in the contrary, I think the uses for Achillea millefolium, the usos para Achillea millefolium o Yarrow son más focalizados. They're more focused in a way, so it's appropriate that it has fewer names. It's interesting correlation.
Yeah, that is interesting. So maybe let's get into some of the uses. Do you want to start?
Perfect. You brought up the name, the carpenter's herb, and that even in English, mismo en inglés, es la hierba del carpintero, ¿sí? Y antes de empezar aquí, yo pregunté a mi marido, ¿cuáles son unos usos que te recuerdas en usar Yarrow? I asked my husband right before we started here, what are some uses that you recall using Yarrow? And we have a shop here. One of our businesses is a shop. Entonces, uno de nuestros negocios es una no es una tienda como una
Taller.
taller. Gracias. Es un taller donde ¿cómo que? No es con máquinas.
Em, creo que sería como maquinista o usan máquinas para fabricar toda clase de cosas.
Sí, es fabricar, era la palabra que estaba olvidando. Entonces, fabricamos varias cosas con máquinas de metal. Entonces, es muy común que los hombres aquí pueden cortarse con el metal. No es tan común porque trabajan todos los días con metal y con las máquinas. So here we have one of our businesses is a machine shop. It's very precision, but still the guys work with metal all day, and it's very common to get a cut. And so that was one of the things my husband reminded me of. Well, I'm like, well, of course, yes, that's not only him, but the guys that he works with. So it's perfect. We were discussing also that this is not only the carpenter's herb, no solamente no es la hierba del carpintero porque ayuda con las cortas, mas también unos carpinteros es un tipo, es brujería o es mágico, mágica.
Mágica, sí.
Gracias. So is it really, one of the things we were going to discuss in this podcast is it witchcraft or is it magic? And son los mismos. Sometimes it's like they're the same because we just can't explain it. Parece que para mí, a veces parece que lo mismo puede ser lo mismo porque no sabemos cómo funciona. Esto a veces parece brujería y a veces es mágica. And so so one thing that the carpenters do or would do is put some yarrow in like the corner of the shop. And so sometimes does that bring your attention to be maybe more careful, or is it really magic in that it's protecting you? Entonces es mágica que cuando ponen, por ejemplo, los carpinteros a veces ponen la hierba yarrow, how would you say, in the corner of the shop?
En la esquina.
En la esquina, pero shop, yo me olvidé.
El taller.
Taller. En la esquina del taller. Y o es mágica porque no sabemos cómo funciona, o es que llama la atención de la mente de tomar cuidado. Is it just a message that we keep in our mind? We see it and we think, okay, I'm going to be careful as I'm doing this work. But regardless, that I think is a tie-in to the name of the carpenter's herb.
No sabía. I didn't know that carpenters put it in the corner. Pero me hace pensar en Sudamérica, en muchas partes, in South America, it is understood that each herb has its own spirit, que cada hierba tiene su propio espíritu. Y tal vez el espíritu de Milenrama, or the spirit of a Yarrow, is protective or watching over us. Tal vez el espíritu de la Milenrama nos protege, nos cuida, o por lo mínimo está ahí para ayudar cuando algo pasa. It's there for us, at least at a minimum, for when something happens.
It's interesting. We were, it's interesting. We were on a trip this year. We went up north and we were out mountain biking. And yo y mi marido fuimos a un viaje para andar de bicicleta de montaña. And we were on the side of the hill, and it was a steep hill, perfect place. So this is a good tie-in. Where is Yarrow? Where does it grow? Crezca. Es morro también en español, o morro.
Un morro, sí, like a hill. Ajá, ujú.
Normalmente Yarrow o Milenrama crezca en los morros o morito, no tiene que ser un morro muy grande. It doesn't have to be a big hill. It can be like at a little slope. And so we were biking, and right on the side of the hill, like where you would fall and hurt yourself potentially, was arnica, was yarrow, and plantain. No, it wasn't arnica. Sorry, it was yarrow, plantain, and St. John's wort, which there's one herb in there we haven't addressed yet. But I was like, these are our friends. Like you could fall over on the hill and you would have the herbs that you need right there. You would have, entonces estábamos en el morro andando de bicicleta en la montaña, pero es un morro. Y allá estaba plantado. Ya me olvidé el nombre en español.
Milenrama, Yantén.
También la hierba del día, también also the herb of the day, yarrow or Achillea millefolium, and Milenrama, y una otra hierba, St. John's wort. So maybe we'll have to cover St. John's wort here soon. And what struck me as funny is like you could literally fall over on that hill. Literalmente podría caer en la moro y iba a caer en las hierbas que ayudan. So you could literally fall over on that big hill and you'd fall into the herbs that would help you with your blood cut, with helping to remove infection, and with pain. So hence to say they grow on slopes or on hills, and usually in drier earth.
Mm-hmm. I mean, actually, that kind of brings us to, because on hills, but I would like to show a map. I found a good resource, encontré un buen recurso. Es una página colombiana, pero entonces está en español para todos los hispanoparlantes. It is a web page. It's in Spanish. It's a Colombian web page, but even if you don't speak Spanish, I think you will like this because it gives you a visual of where does yarrow grow. So I'll just un momento.
Y también en Colombia crezca en áreas similares, más seco. It grows in similar areas, like dry ground typically. I mean, it can be wet for a while, but it usually likes drier, sun-exposed areas.
Sí. Entonces, esta es colombiainaturalista.org y pueden buscar muchas plantas acá en esta página. You can look for many different plants on this web page, and it's neat. It gives you about the plant, taxonomical information, and similar species. But the part that is for any language is the map, because it shows you dónde crece. Y yendo a lo de los morros, si miramos acá, esta es Colombia. This is Colombia. And if you're not familiar with the topography of Colombia, these are the Andes Mountains. So they're big, 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 big mountains. Bogota alone is, I don't know what it's in feet, but 2,600 meters above sea level. So that's, what's that? I think it's over
5,000 feet.
Yeah, it's high up. And if you can see, and the Milenrama is growing in the mountains. You're not seeing it on the coast. You're not seeing it in the jungle or on the plains over here. Entonces no crece en los llanos, no crece en la selva, crece en las montañas. Y acá en Ecuador, igual en las montañas, en la costa, not on the coast, not in the jungle. Y si bajamos un poco por el mapa, acá cerca Cusco, otra vez montañas, pero yo también personalmente la vi. I saw yarrow growing in Peru. It doesn't show it in this map. In the region of Oh, here we go. In the region of Huaraz, which is right here, which are high peaks. They call this region of Peru the Switzerland of South America, because it's like snow-capped peaks, gorgeous blue, like ice blue lakes with glaciers overhanging them. And yeah, I saw Yarrow there, which was neat. Entonces, acá le dicen la Suiza latinoamericana.
Increíble.
What's that?
Increíble.
Ajá, sí. Y si salimos un poco más, podemos ver que es, por ejemplo, acá en Argentina está un poco en la costa, pero acá el clima es diferente. So here it's on the coast in Argentina, but it's not quite as tropical as the Caribbean coast of Colombia. So it's a different climate. And then same here in Brazil, but it's not quite, it's in the south of Brazil, not quite in the northern areas, which is more tropical and jungle-like. And
imagino que esas áreas de verde más oscuro is donde están buscando. So these darker green areas, I imagine, is where they're looking. And then the light green is they haven't searched those or not collecting data in those areas.
Yeah, because I just don't think it grows. Like in Paraguay, it's tropical, it's hot, but it still could grow. I never saw it there, but and then
sorry,
what's that?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, and then I was gonna show North America because
that's what I was gonna ask. I was like, wait a minute, let's compare. Vamos comparar.
It's quite funny.
Wow. It's on fire.
Y Europa también.
Wow.
Entonces creo que tal vez le prefiere pues temperaturas más no tan calientes, no tan tal vez tan húmedas como el Caribe, like the Caribbean. It's humid, it's hot, and but it's interesting because like the southern states is humid and hot and can get quite hot. But I guess because of the seasons, por las temporadas, tal vez le da la oportunidad, it gives the Yarrow the opportunity to grow. I don't know.
Imagino que es la humedad. I think it's the humidity. Porque mira Florida. Look at Florida is definitely a tropical area, and most of Texas also. I bet if we zoomed in, I bet the Gulf. Imagino que si zoom in. How do you say zoom in?
Si aumentas o agrandas.
Agrandas o aumentas. Si mira, Gulf of Mexico is más húmedo por el Gulf of Mexico, Louisiana, Mississippi, por ejemplo, y esta área de Texas, de San Antonio y al norte es más seco. Entonces, yo imagino, pero sí hay the desert, but it probably doesn't like desert in the west of Texas. So
yeah, and that's, if you look down here, it's interesting because this whole coastal area of Peru is desert, and it doesn't seem to grow there either. I never saw it there either. So yeah, I guess it likes the in between, like not humid, not super dry.
It can tolerate quite a bit. I mean, it gets very humid here. Puede tolerar mucho humedad, imagino, porque aquí in Minnesota, it gets very humid in the summer. But it seems like it just can't be all the time. No puede ser todo el tiempo que está húmedo o demasiado seco.
Sí, pero interesante. Y sí, acá Europa también.
Qué recurso bueno. Yo estaba leyendo mi mente. You were reading my mind. I was wondering if there was some kind of resource like this.
Sí, y tienen otras plantas. There's other plants, so look it up. Yeah, I just found it, so I'm going to explore more on this webpage. Voy a explorar más esta página, pero we'll put it in the show notes so that people can explore and yeah, you know, you don't need to speak Spanish, but you can view the map, which helps.
A lot. So that reminds me of another part of our doctrine of signatures. What did we translate doctrine of signatures again?
Doctrina de asignaturas.
Doctrina de asignaturas. So what are the sign symbols in the name and where it grows? All kinds. I mean, you could just take any kinds of signs and symbols you get from the plant. And one of the signs and symbols is that, so of course, in the leaves, they're cuts. So ancortas en las hojas es una signatura. But also it has to do with heat, and that ties in with another signature and a use. En esto también indica un uso también y una asignatura. So it's helpful for fever, ayuda a la fiebre. And esto es una de mis historias. This is one of my stories. Hace casi 10 años yo tuve una enfermedad misteriosa. No sé lo que era. And about 10 years ago, I had a mysterious illness, I call it. I think I know what it was now, but we can get into that later. Yo creo que yo sé lo que era, pero es una historia para otro día, las detalles. So, but I had a fever, a very high fever that would go up to about 104 degrees Fahrenheit. I'm not sure what that is in Celsius, but yo tuve una fiebre que era muy alta. Y era 104 grados en Fahrenheit, que es muy alto. En Celsius, ¿lo que es?
Es 40.
40. Y es alto. Iba a 104 o 40 a un poco más, un poquito más. Y era una época que mi marido estaba trabajando mucho, iba a volver a la casa. My husband was working a lot at the time, but he would come back home about every 4 hours. Y cada 4 horas iba a me dar un poquito de tintura de Yarrow en, what is wrist?
En la muñeca.
En la muñeca, solamente unas gotitas y bajaba mi temperatura muy rápido, muy bien, a una temperatura que era más segura, pero también you want to keep the temperature. He brought it down, just a couple of drops of the tincture brought the temperature down to a safe level, but still hot enough so my body could fight off whatever was happening. So bajaba la temperatura a un nivel más seguro, pero bastante para luchar la doença, lo que era, no sé lo que era. Yo espero que no estoy confundiendo bastante español o portugués.
No, estás hablando súper bien.
So that is it's a terrific use. And what's really interesting is here they'll do controlled burns. Aquí en Minnesota, donde vivo, es cerca de Canadá, pero tienen muchas plantas aquí. There's a lot of plants around here. And so they'll do controlled burns. Van a hacen quemadas controladas.
Sí, o incendios controlados.
Incendios controlados, gracias. And so in these controlled burns, it's amazing that you will look out in the plains and where there will be stalks of yarrow. Now, not green, but you'll see the stalks of yarrow standing straight up where everything is burnt down. Wow. So en estos incendios controlados, ves que todas las plantas están quemadas, ¿sí? Pero Milenrama está, how would you say that? How would you,
Parada.
Pero no quemada totalmente.
So sí, está intacta.
Intacta, sí. You can see by looking across that area, you're like, oh, there's Yarrow. And
wow, that's amazing. Yeah. I've never seen that. Nunca he visto eso, pero dice mucho.
Sí, como en esta época hay muchos wildfires, so maybe fuegos silvestres.
Ajá.
Really? Okay, I didn't know if
No, salvajes.
salvajes.
Ajá.
Silvestre is that's another salvajes. Great. I just wanted to make sure I wasn't using the wrong word, because sometimes that word can also be like a wild animal, and that's a different word.
Yeah. Yeah, that's more for like wild animal or if you're talking about a wild herb, like if you say, oh, I found oregano silvestre, like I found oregano in the wild, like not in my garden, no en mi jardín, sino por ahí.
Great. See, that's important to know. I also wonder about naming your child Sylvester. You might get a wildcat out of that one. So the wildfires, I heard that some people actually encourage to plant yarrow around areas where you don't want the fire to cross. Entonces, en este, unas personas, imagino que hicieron esto antes de un fuego salvaje, ¿sí? Plantan el Milenrama en un área, en una frontera, ¿sí? Para no dejar el fuego pasar a la casa, un área que no quieren que quema. I don't know how well it works, basically planting this border of yarrow to protect the fire, because of course then there's other timbers, or there are embers that can essentially like jump, but it kind of makes sense, regarding the controlled burns. So I would love to hear from it. Si sabes de esto, deja un comentario.
Y para mí que eso es como magia, porque how could an herb do that? When like fire is very hot and it's, the wind is blowing, el viento sopla, el incendio, el fuego, y quema hasta árboles. It burns trees, but somehow Yarrow just says nope.
And the plant itself is not like super moist. La planta misma no es húmeda, no es más o menos seca. Entonces no es como, parece que iba a quemar muy bien. It looks like it feels like it would burn really well.
Sí, y por ejemplo, Liz Wolfe, que es una herborista bastante conocida en Estados Unidos. She's a very well-known herbalist in the United States. She's talked about using yarrow for sunscreen and as a burn preventative, como un protector para la piel, para las quemaduras del sol de la piel.
And I did that this last year. I started using that, and the oil or the salve work really well. The aceite es
ungüento.
Ungüento funciona muy bien por esto. Todavía, you can still get a tan, but you won't burn. And that it totally worked for me. So I know these words. I know how to say this. It's just not coming to me. Todavía.
¿Te puedes broncear?
Sí, broncear. Es lo mismo en portugués. Bronceado del sol. So you can still get a nice tan, but you don't burn. So it's I forgot about that one. Thank you.
Yeah.
Para mí, los otros usos y unas historias más mágicas, para mí, some of the stories and uses that to me are more magical, that work really well for me is, how, if you're a person that's more like emotionally sensitive, si eres una persona más sensible, emocional, es más fácil sentir too much. It's más fácil, it's easy to feel too much, and it's like all the emotions are hitting you. And so it's like, entonces cuando sientes tantas emociones, es como mil cortas. Mil cortas, like it feels like 1,000 cuts when you're feeling all these emotions. And so when it comes to my awareness, cuando when I realize, cuando realizo
Ajá.
que esto está pasando conmigo, when I realize this is happening with me, first, that can be challenging. No es fácil notar que esto está pasando, yeah. But I'll just take a couple drops, again, just unas gotas en la muñeca, and it helps. That's all it takes, is like 1 or 2 drops. ¿Es mágica? Is it magic? Or is it just the espíritu de la planta, de la hierba? I don't know. But it is magical because it really, really does help. It's absolutely incredible.
Yeah, that's so cool. I didn't know that one no conocía ese uso. Qué chévere.
Y normalmente cuando usan las hierbas para las emociones, usually when you use the herbs for emotions, you use the flower essences, or that's what most herbalists think. Normalmente los herbalistas piensan que si hay una condición de emociones, usas las esencias de las flores. ¿Sí?
Sí.
Pero en este caso, but in this case, la tintura, the tincture, works great. Es excelente por esto.
Sí, y bueno, volviendo al uso para la regulación de la temperatura, o temperature regulation use, si pensamos en tu caso, when you had a fever, lo que hace el Milenrama es que abre los poros, or it opens the pores of the skin, which allows heat to escape. And it moves all the internal heat from the internal organs to the periphery, to the outside, to the skin where it can escape. So as you were saying, it allows the body to continue to heat up, to fight whatever is afflicting it, while allowing the heat to escape, so that you don't have like a greenhouse effect inside your body. Entonces, al abrir los poros de la piel y al mover el calor de los órganos internos hacia afuera, ayuda a que en un caso como de fiebre o simplemente de calor excesivo, que el calor salga por la piel, pero mantiene la temperatura más o menos elevada para que el cuerpo luche contra lo que está luchando. And that's interesting because they say Yarrow is the master of the blood, el maestro de la sangre. Y as you were saying before, how it can move blood, or it can stop bleeding, right? Entonces, I've definitely used it for cuts in the woods. If you're in the woods or in nature, si estás en la naturaleza y te cortas y ves Milenrama, es tan simple como masticar un poco la hoja. So you chew the leaf a little bit, make a poultice. Eso se llama una cataplasma en español. Y con eso lo pones en tu cortada. Y vas a ver, you'll see it stops the bleed, which is I remember the first time I did it, and it was, it's magical. I don't know how else to describe it, because and by the way, para que sepan, yo tengo hemofilia. Entonces, I have hemophilia. So for those of you that are not familiar, it's a bleeding disorder. So I bleed more easily than everyone else. And entonces yo sangro mucho más fácil y se demora. It takes longer for me to stop bleeding than everyone else. Me sangro más tiempo. Entonces la Milenrama funciona para mí. Entonces, if it works for me, it will likely work for you.
Me he olvidado de esto. I forgot about that. Entonces es como tu hierba. It's like your herb. Y lo que es increíble es que trabajabas como en la cocina.
Sí.
Before this, I think what is incredible is that you worked in a kitchen, where it's full of knives, right?
Oh, yeah. And I cut myself many times, and I never knew about Yarrow, old kitchen tricks like, pack the wound with salt or coffee to make it stop bleeding. And those work too, but they're not as pretty. No,
It's like salt in the wound, you know, something, it kind of
sí,
hurts.
it burns, yeah, and it doesn't heal as well, because it kind of burns the skin. Cuando le echas sal a la herida, como que la quema, como que it like cauterizes it, la cauteriza, but Yarrow, it heals very nicely. It really does. It doesn't, it stops the bleed, and it allows for the skin to kind of regenerate. Because I wish I knew about Yarrow before, but you know, eventually you learn about it. And yeah, and then so another use, and which brings me to a story that shows the opposite effect of like moving the blood, but it's concussions or contusiones. When you hit your head, there's of course blood that's pooling in your head. It's like an internal bruise. So you want to dissipate the blood. You want to make it move out of the way so that it doesn't concentrate, so that it doesn't swell up inside your skull. Cuando tienes una contusión, quieres que la sangre se siga moviendo para que no se forme un chichón o una inflamación adentro del cráneo. Entonces Yarrow is great for hitting anytime you hit your head, even if it's like a small bruise, así sea un chichón chiquito, te puede ayudar. Pero hace 2 meses y medio, mi esposa estaba con mi hijo en el supermercado. My wife was with my son in the supermarket, and he climbed on the shopping cart, se montó en el carrito, y se paró y se cayó y se pegó acá atrás con el piso. Like he fell on the back of his head, very hard, with you know, and so a worst nightmare of a parent, right? Like una pesadilla para cualquier padre o madre.
And was she out with the baby too? So she had to figure out what to do. Estaba fuera también con el bebé.
Sí. Sí, estaba con la bebé también, entonces me llamó, estoy en camino a la casa, I'm on my way home, y llegaron en 15 minutos, 15 minutes later they were home, y Yarrow everywhere, like Yarrow. Y igual fuimos a urgencias, we went to the emergency unit, of course, when your child is hurt, you want to do everything possible, you haces lo que sea por tu hijo para verificar que estén bien, entonces we went to emerge, pero en emergency, estuve esperando un buen rato y cada 5 minutos, Yarrow por toda la cabeza, y todo el mundo me miraba como, everyone looked at me in the emergency line like, what is that guy doing?
I'm sure it wasn't just a couple of drops.
Oh yeah, no, I took a 500 ml bottle and just every 5 minutes. And you'll see, and so that's an extreme example, concussions, but you know, bruises, like you know, as a hemophiliac, I use it all the time because I get bruises. Entonces, like if you bump your arm on the table, or you hit your shin on the bed or whatever, put some Yarrow on it. And what I have found to be the best use for me, or the more versatile, is a liniment, una cataplasma de Milenrama, y como lo más versátil para chichones, golpes. And I simply just put Yarrow in rubbing alcohol, en alcohol, ¿cómo es que se dice? Alcohol para limpiar la piel. Alcohol, hay una palabra, se me olvidó. I forgot the word in Spanish for rubbing alcohol, pero sí, alcohol que se usa para limpiar la piel. And you'll see, o sea, por ejemplo, in that case, donde se pegó mi hijo, where my son hit his head, like there was a bruise, there was a bump, había un chichón, and you put the Yarrow and the bruise goes down, like it disappears. And then 5 minutes later, it was up again. It came back out. Entonces Yarrow again, and it goes back in, and then so on. And I think after 3 hours, it stopped popping out again. I've used it so many times with my son because he hits himself. He's very, excited. So he hits his head a lot. And just, like on the table, on the, and you'll see the bruise start forming, you put it on, and then the bruise just goes away. Usually it's just one time. Pero sí, para chichones, para golpes, sore muscles, it's great. So yeah, it's again, is that what is that? Is that magic, or is that
incredible? So as someone with hemophilia, do you find that the cuts heal faster? Is the fastest, I'm assuming the fastest and best remedy?
Yes, yeah, definitely. I use the liniment quite a bit. Entonces uso la cataplasma de alcohol a menudo y ayuda mucho. It helps a lot, especially if you use it like as soon as something happens. Like if you hit your, wherever, and then you right away you use it, it helps to prevent it from becoming, because it moves the blood away, it dissipates the blood, and then it doesn't concentrate. Mm-hmm. And I've used it too for like old bruises where there was like a lump. O sea, un chichón viejo que se había calcificado o se había endurecido, and like a hardened old bruise, and it takes longer, but it works.
Mm-hmm. Wow. So I had so many things going through my mind, but I didn't want to cut you off. So I don't know where I want to go. Those are incredible stories, first of all. I mean, because who doesn't have kids that are just, occasionally bump themselves? Primero para los niños. Es muy, muy importante, ayuda tanto. One thing I think is important to point out too is that you still went to the emergency room. Lo que es importante decir también es que todavía fuiste a la sala de emergencias, ¿sí? Y so it's not that we're saying herbs, or nothing. You have to decide that for yourself. Es tu decisión, ¿sí? Tú tienes que decir cuándo tienes que usar las hierbas, cuándo quieres ir al hospital. Es importante que haces este. You make this. It's very important that you make this decision for yourself. But I am curious. Oh, I remember. Me recuerdo. No pregunta. What did the doctors think? Did they see you using Yarrow?
No, they didn't see me using Yarrow because it was a busy day, I guess, and there was a lot of people waiting. So by the time we saw a doctor, he was fine, and I wasn't worried. I was like 99% sure everything is going to be okay, but we were already there. We'd waited and thought, we'll wait and see. And I did say that I used Yarrow, and they were like, what is that? And I said a plant, and they're like, all right. I'm like, no, les conté a los doctores que usé una hierba de Milenrama. No tenían ni idea qué era y no les importó. They're just like, oh, but he's fine. O sea, they assessed him, hicieron su asesoramiento y dijeron, sí, está bien, descansar, dormir y ser menos activo, claro, para recuperarse. The usual recuperation, rest, and less active, and be careful kind of thing. But that was it.
That's a great story. I mean, it's so common too. I think every parent has a similar story, right, of a fall, something that really, really concerned them. So I have so you mentioned hemophilia, which has got to be really inconvenient at times.
Yeah.
Dijiste que tienes, ¿es así que dices esto, que tienes hemofilia? O,
sí, que exacto. Tengo hemofilia.
So I think some women probably feel sometimes that they have a disease when it comes to menstruation. And sorry if this is too much information, but it'll help someone out there. Lo siento si es demasiada información, pero va a ayudar a alguien que a veces las mujeres pueden sentir que tienen una enfermedad con sus menses también. So for me, sometimes if it feels like it's not coming on, like it's supposed to, like it's just, and sometimes I'll just take Yarrow and just, again, it's one of those occasions where it helps the blood move. And especially if you know it's that time anyways, and it just needs help starting. For anyone that may help them out there, similarly, you know, even if there's emotional stuff at the same time, it can help free that up as well. So just wanted to make sure I didn't forget to say that one, because that also can seem like magic.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is such an important one because, again, master of the blood, it moves it when it needs to be moved, and it stops it from moving when it needs to stop moving. La maestra de la sangre. Pero también es importante decir que por ser una an emmenagogue, que promueve la menstruación, is contraindicado, is contraindicated if you're pregnant. So if you're pregnant, definitely do not use Yarrow because it could make, it could, you know, bring on menstruation, which is of course what you don't want.
Perfecto, sí, exactamente. I think I forgot to say it in Spanish, pero a veces cuando estoy esperando mi menses y no está empezando, a veces yo solamente tomo unas gotas, también pongo unas gotas otra vez en la muñeca, también ayuda con las emociones. A veces sí también quieren mover las emociones y la sangre. And como dijo Alberto, si estás embarazada, no usas Yarrow, porque es contraindicado por una mujer que está embarazada, porque mueve la sangre y no quieres que mueve tanta sangre en el útero, claro, cuando estás embarazada. So you don't want to move the blood too much when you're pregnant. So that's something to even just keep note of if you hear blood mover in general for an herb.
Yeah. Y bueno, creo que una cosa que podríamos cubrir que es sencilla, an easy thing that we could cover, which is important to know for all herbs, and it's if you learn this in particular, like then you can get to know herbs. Si te aprendes este truco, digamos, este sistema, o no es un sistema, como, o sea, básicamente, si aprendes la importancia de lo que voy a decir, puedes tú mismo probar hierbas diferentes y más o menos ver para qué uso. So the taste of a plant gives us a lot of information about what it's good for. El sabor de la planta nos da mucha información de para qué funciona. Entonces, Yarrow es amarga, it's bitter, pero también es astringente, it's astringent. Entonces, astringente es, or astringency is, if you've ever had a tannic red wine where it puckers your mouth, un vino rojo seco que te como aprieta la boca, and so it tightens tissues, which makes sense for if you have a cut, right? It's going to bring the tissues together, it's going to tighten them up and prevent loss of fluid or loss of blood. Entonces, la astringencia atrae los tejidos de la piel o del cuerpo. Entonces, si está sangrando, por eso ayuda de esa manera. Y el sabor amargo, the bitter taste, is important because it stimulates digestion. Entonces, el sabor amargo estimula la digestión, los jugos gástricos. Entonces, puede ser muy buena para la digestión. You know, any bitter herb, cualquier hierba amarga, va a promover la digestión. Entonces, por eso, cuando el sabor muchas veces nos indica o nos ayuda a conocer los usos de la planta. So yeah, if you're curious, if you're just learning, if you're just starting your herbal journey, taste plants. That's how you learn. You experience that taste, and then you think, like, what is it doing in my mouth? And okay, well, that could be, you know, and then go read about it, because once you experience it, you'll never forget. Entonces, si estás empezando, ve y prueba, y vas a entender un poco cómo te hace sentir la planta y así nunca se te olvidará.
Exactly. Buena dica. That's a really good tip. And I almost forgot. Yeah, I'm really glad that you brought it up. And it's such a fun experience too, that es una experiencia muy fascinante, porque puedes empezar con unas hierbas. Por ejemplo, en el Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, hay una clase de gratis que puedes hacer de gratis. You can, it's in, okay, I can't go back and forth like that. I'm going back and forth in half and half. Okay, so at the Matthew Wood Institute of Herbalism, we have lots of free classes, and one of them is the tasting and sensing herbs. Now, it is just in English, so if you're an English speaker or know enough, it's a really fun experience. Entonces tenemos una clase que es gratis en el Matthew Wood, el Instituto de Matthew Wood. Aquí voy a mostrar y después hablar más. I'm going to show you and then I'll talk a little bit more. So this is a great way to experience it. Porque cuando empiezas con unas hierbas más simples, como no combinan tantos sabores o sensaciones, if you have a few herbs that are more simple and don't have as many tastes and sensations to them, then you can really get to know what those tastes and sensations are. And so this is a fun way to start. Just wanted to show you that. And the way you find that, y como buscas, voy a poner esto en las notas. I'll put these in the notes as well. But if you go to all courses and then you type in free and go to free classes, it's here, tasting and sensing herbs. I believe I must have used the wrong search word. You should be able to, debes poder buscar solamente una palabra tasting. Yeah, and there, oh, it will be in here. Una otra manera de buscar. También hay un pedazo, o es entero, ¿te recuerdas?
Ese es como una
Clip.
Un pedazo, sí, es un clip, un corte.
Okay. Entonces, buena dica, pero maybe someday we'll do it in Spanish. That would be a fun way after we've covered some more herbs. Después más hierbas. A lo mejor podemos hacer in Spanglish, and you can test that out. We'll see. Let us know. Déjanos saber en los comentarios lo que quieren saber, aprender. So, or solamente, or just drink some red wine and then you'll get to know that.
Or bite a banana peel.
Bite a banana peel, yeah.
Sí, si no conoces el sabor astringente, pues el vino rojo seco, o puedes morder la cáscara de un banano y vas a ver.
Perfect. A lot of fun. Well, those were the primary stories that I wanted to share. Like those are like the main, they can come up in a number of ways, but kind of like what we said, es un nombre simples o no tiene tantos nombres como plantago, pero los usos son muy importantes. The uses are very simple and primary, but very, very important. Is a simple way to say it.
Sí, exacto. It's, I think it's so important because herbalism, in a modern day world where we have so much information at our fingertips, and even, in terms of science and how much we've advanced, going back to the basics, just, with what you can tell from your own experience with a plant is invaluable, because it has so much information, but B, you're not reading it. You're not you're living it, you're feeling it, you're sensing it, and then not only do you not forget, but you understand what that plant is doing. Entonces, si en un mundo moderno como hoy, con la ciencia y con todos los avances magníficos que tenemos, que son muy importantes, es importante recordarse de lo básico, que es tu propia experiencia de cualquier sustancia. Entonces, si pruebas las hierbas, vas a entenderlas a un nivel personal, a un nivel íntimo, y vas a entender la planta mucho mejor de que si lees sobre la planta.
Mm-hmm. Very well said. And we didn't touch on this very much or at all, but it does come in different colors. Yo no creo que dijiste algo sobre esto, yo no oí, o no digamos nada de los otros colores.
Sí, no hemos dicho nada, pero es importante porque el blanco es el oficial, el blanco es el que quieres usar. Los otros son muy lindos y creo que no son tan potentes. La verdad, nunca he usado los otros, solo he usado el blanco, porque es el oficial. So I've never actually used the other colored ones. I've only used the white one, but it's the official one, the white one. And the other ones are pretty, but I think they're not as strong or as useful. Although I've heard the cream colored one perhaps could be used in its stead, but the white one is essentially what you want to find.
Mm-hmm. And in the flower essences, the different colors have different uses, but that's a deeper topic, fascinating topic. Y los colores tienen indicaciones diferentes cuando usas las esencias de las flores florales.
Florales, ajá.
Florales, okay. Pero es en un otro asunto que es para un otro día a lo mejor.
Sí.
Oh, well, this is a great one and definitely worth having in your first aid kit and to learn more about and experience for yourself, like Alberto said. So let us know, déjanos saber en los comentarios qué quieres saber, what else you want to know, unas historias tuyas también. De esta hierba, sus experiencias. Let us know in the comments, what are your experiences, what else you would like to know, your experiences with this herb, and we'd love to hear from you. Make sure to subscribe, claro que suscribir a este canal, and we will see you next time. We look forward to it. Thanks, Alberto. It was great.
Thank you, Tara. I had a wonderful time as always. And stay tuned for the next plant.
Adios.